and see what was going on. And then it sort of was tabled for a while. So my notes go sort of month by month what was happening. We had a committee that was formed in May of 2007 to really start digging into what we were doing, how we were doing it, and then how it compared to other schools. So as the months went on, we formed a dining hall advisory committee, which was composed of a number of folks. Doug was on that committee, John McKenzie, Eric Hunker, Maggie Kerner, who's our CFO, and actually at the time also had two boys here. We had a parent by the name of Gail Kay. Some of you may know her. She is an expert in school nutrition at Ohio State University. And we had representatives, student and faculty representatives from every division. With the exception of the lower school, we did not have any lower school student representatives because we knew what they would ask for. And in some of the surveys, we had the kids saying, could you please put a Wendy's in the middle because that would fix everything. And that was the direction we wanted to go. So what we identified as the two main issues in 2007, 2008 were that there were actually too many choices. The kids were having a hard time figuring out what it was they were going to have. That ties into time. There wasn't a lot of time for them. And also the choices that were being offered were not what we wanted to give our kids. And so without throwing anyone under the bus, I'm going to give you a picture of what a normal lunch looked like. And some of you may have been here at the time, so you can weigh in, absolutely. On the tables. And I wrote this down because it was in one of my emails that I sent to Doug. We had hot dogs with white buns on the tables and donuts. That's what was on the tables. There was no fresh fruit available at all anywhere in the cafeteria. And there were no fresh vegetables anywhere at all in the cafeteria. There was no deli bar. There was no salad bar. We didn't have anything like that at all. We had the frozen yogurt machine, and that did not have any dairy at all. It was all chemicals. So we were able to make some pretty good choices or changes pretty quickly by changing out what was going into the froyo machine, by getting fresh fruit and vegetables available for the kids. We were putting cut up carrots, that sort of thing, on the tables. And then I'm trying to look to see when everything started to happen. In March 2008, we began interviewing third-party providers, and we interviewed, I think, 4 different companies, all nationally recognized for institutional food service. That's what we are, we're an institution. We're serving we have 1,070 students, and I don't know how many faculty and staff, but this dining hall crew is serving a lot of people in a very short period of time in a facility that was not built for this many people, right? So this is the same dining hall my husband was in 30 years ago, and there was all boys, and there were a lot less of them. So in May of 2008, we began interviewing managers. That's when we interviewed Michael Ray for the first time, actually, because we had determined that Sage would be the best partner for us in this. And Michael was fantastic, and so he came on board, if I remember correctly, July 1st, 2008. And we had made a number of really positive changes. We had to take into consideration the budget. We do have a budget. We had to take into consideration religious and cultural issues, and we had the members of the committee represented lots of different backgrounds. So we brought in the vegetarian entree, which was not just intended to be rice or soup or salad, but really a comprehensive meal for those who need to adhere to a vegetarian diet. And we incorporated whole wheat bread, which was also new for this cafeteria. And we began cooking. And I think Michael, who isn't up here, but maybe he should be, but he can tell you, he brought in sharp knives and we began cooking. So and I know Hannah's laughing, and that sounds fun. It sounds kind of funny, but it's really where we were. We were taking food out of freezers and putting it into ovens. That's servicing on tables, and that's not what's happening today. We're actually cooking back there. So that's the background. Ask questions if I can answer them, I will. If somebody else can answer them, I'm gladly hand the microphone over to them. Anyone? You have to have a question because you're here. What are you most concerned about?
Can you describe now what's in place?
So can we describe now what's in place, because maybe not everybody knows that, and I'm not going to be the best one to answer that question because that's not my gig, but I think it's Hannah's, right? And it's Hannah, is it Rowley? Okay, thank you for being here.
Hello everyone, and thanks for having me. My name is Hannah Rowley, and I am one of the dietitians that works for Sage Dining Services. And to give you a little background about myself, I've been with Sage for over 5 years. Prior to coming to Sage, I worked at Johns Hopkins University in their research center, primarily focusing on food allergy management and some of the more progressive techniques they're using right now as far as oral immunotherapy, if anybody is familiar with that, to help with the safety and tolerance of food allergies. But I came to Sage to sort of help with that, but also have taken on many additional roles. To give you an idea of Sage as a company, is if any of you guys are new to Columbus Academy, we are a privately held company. We, for the first time this year now, can call ourselves an international company because we now have a relationship with the school in Canada, which has been really exciting for us. But we focus on private, independent K-12 schools. We do not service any public schools. And outside of the K-12 market, we have some small private colleges. So we are throughout the United States, from the East Coast to the West Coast. We love the fact that we have that niche focus on just K-12 independent schools. We've learned over the years that there's very specific needs and wants within this community. And if we stay focused on that area, we're best able to meet your needs and understand what you guys want. We also, as a company, have a big focus on from-scratch cooking. And I slightly giggled at the idea of sharp knives in the kitchen. And we would hate to see that a box cutter is your most used piece of equipment in a kitchen. We really focus on using fresh ingredients, cooking from scratch, using recipes. And I'll go through a little bit too of some of the station concepts and some of the minimum standards that we have that really help to shape the creation of the menu. And another component that is important for us is having variety, but as mentioned before, sort of the right amount of variety. Certainly for little kids, you give them too many choices, it's hard for them to get through the line and feel like they're going to get to sit down and eat their meal in a non-rushed fashion. But as the kids get older, they certainly are looking for more choice. They're looking to come into the dining hall and have something different every day. So we try to strike that right balance, or we'll try to manipulate somewhat of the dining experience depending on the age. Now I know for some of the lower school we do a bit of family style. And then as they get older, it's pretty much they can come into the dining hall and really navigate for themselves what they would like. Now with the menus, to start with that concept and how we go about that, it's really a collaborative approach between the dietitian, the food service director, Michael Ray, at this school, and then Ron Lynn, who is the district manager. The district manager, just to give you an idea, Ron just manages schools or oversees schools locally in the vicinity of this area. So we all come from different backgrounds, and we all provide a different lens or perspective when we're looking at the menu. So Michael creates the menu based on standards that Sage has. So to give you an example, we have different station concepts, one being main ingredient. And our standards within that station concept are that we have 2 entrees available, 2 protein-based entrees. We have 2 vegetables, fresh vegetables, always available, one that is always steamed, minimal seasoning, if any at all. When I say minimal, it might be salt and pepper, but there's always a fresh steamed vegetable available. And then usually another vegetable that might have some additional seasoning, something that would really perhaps speak to the kids or make the vegetables seem more appealing. and then we have a starch available. So that's just the standard F1 concept. Another concept we have is improvisations, which is our salad bar. Now the standard of that is there are 4 salads available every day. One we call it build your own. So it's a deconstructed salad, something that is usually familiar to people, let's just say a grilled Caesar salad. But it's deconstructed into its individual components, but there's always a display plate so the students can see how you would put that together. But then they're free to choose how they would like to put that together. But then there's also a vegetarian or vegan salad available, a whole grain salad available, and then an other composed salad. We try to also give our chefs that we hire some freedom, to be creative, to learn what the community likes, and to create some of those additional dishes. We always have fresh cut fruit available, and it's important to specify that it's cut. We know that kids, and not even kids, but most people, are more apt to eat more fruit if it's cut up. And so we really try to take advantage of some of those behaviors that we know are well established amongst individuals. So fresh cut fruit's always available. We also here, at least, there is that vegetarian or vegan station that's available that always has brown rice and some kind of substantial vegetarian protein. One of the things when I'm looking at a menu is I hate to see that the vegetarian entree is just some combination of cheese and pasta or cheese and bread. I really want to see the beans, the lentils. Can they incorporate tofu? Those types of things. If you are following a vegetarian diet, you want to make sure you're getting the substantial sources. So Michael writes a menu that sort of fits into each of those station concepts, and he creates it here. Sage has no corporate menus. No 2 menus are alike. If you were to go to Columbus School for Girls, if you were to go look at their menu, it's different than Columbus Academy's. So it's unique to your guys' location. So Michael writes the menu. It comes to me. I review the menu for those standards. I also review the menu because we have a nutrition education component to that menu, which is our Spotlight program. I'll elaborate a little bit more on that. I review that. I look to see that there's variety, that there's choice, that we're meeting those minimum standards for each of those station concepts. And then we might go a little bit back and forth. I might, send it back to him with a couple questions or ask him if he can change or move things around. And then once we're satisfied with that, then we move it on to Ron. And Ron certainly has a different eye than Michael and I do. And he will then review the menu. And then once he gives his sort of stamp of approval, it's active for you guys. Just so you know, the menus are available online. You can also, one of the newest features that we've added this year is that you can click on the menu items and you can see the ingredients of the dishes. We're trying to provide more transparency as far as how we're preparing foods, what are the ingredients. And then another feature that we have that we really promote with just the adults and the parents is that the calorie and nutrition information is available as well. Our message is really to the parents about that, not the students, because we really want an adult to be interpreting that information for the child, if necessary. We like to use our Spotlight program with the kids, rather than the students focusing on calories and fat and those types of things. We've learned that this age group is potentially at risk for developing eating disorders, so we try to make sure that they don't get too focused on that information, and then we also know that the needs of a child are very individual. So some child may certainly have higher energy needs than another child. So we really would like that information just disseminated to the parents, and then if it needs to be interpreted for the child, it's being done through an adult. But the biggest feature this year is that ability to click on the menu item and see the ingredients. And we've noticed that has been most beneficial or most used by parents of students with food allergies or who follow a gluten-free diet. Then as we do 3 menu reviews every year, so we keep them seasonal. So there's usually one at the beginning of the school year. Right now, Michael, you may have already submitted it, your menu for the winter, and then we also do a menu for the spring. It's important for us to really build menus that are based on the ingredients that are available, and to play up seasonality, and to also use local product. So to write just one menu at the beginning of the school year and never change it doesn't work for us. So there's at least 3 cycles or 3 changes to the menu throughout the school year. On the menus, when the students come into the dining hall, you guys may have noticed that there's dots on the menu. It's our Spotlight Nutrition program. It's a way that we hope to educate or guide the students' decisions when they're in the dining hall. The basic concept behind the Spotlight program is variety, balance, and moderation. And we use basically a plate model, and there's the image right there as far as to help students guide their choices in the dining hall. So we recommend that you fill half of your plate with foods that are labeled with green dots. Most of your foods that are labeled with green dots are going to be your vegetables, your whole grains, your lean proteins, it's going to be your fruits, those types of things. And then to fill somewhat of a quarter to a third of your plate with yellow dot foods, and then a quarter with red dot foods. Now, red dot foods are really our focus on those, are that it's either small portions or less frequently. So I give the example of, well, if my child wants pizza, it's not going to fit on a quarter of their plate, so how does this model work? And that's just what we recommend in those situations is you would pick the pizza and you would fill half of your plate or the rest of your plate with green dot items. And then certainly in that case, it's a larger portion, so that's something that we would be choosing or recommending that they choose on a less frequent basis. But we do notice that with our menus, and certainly with a lot of foods, that a combination of green, yellow, and red dots on a student's plate every day is probably what really makes sense to be getting a full breadth of nutrients and a well-rounded plate. Now, in the back of the scenes, how we determine what the dot color of those foods are. That's done by the dietitians. We analyze the recipes and the products that the managers are sourcing and buying, and we base the dot colors on 3 factors: the total fat content, the added sugar, not natural sugar, but the added sugar, and also sodium. And so we look at those after we analyze the recipe, and that's how we assign the dot color, and we have criteria for that. There's 3 dietitians total that work at Sage, and recipes are submitted by managers like Michael Ray. They're coming from chefs. We're doing analysis, we're tweaking them, we're working with them to improve those recipes so they can write menus. Another area I know that was asked for me to talk about is sort of how we manage food allergies or individuals who may be on other special diets in the dining hall. And one popular diet these days, whether it's medically necessary or people have found it to be beneficial for them, is a gluten-free diet. So our focus on students with special dietary needs or who follow restricted diets is we want them to feel like they can fully participate in the lunch program just like the rest of the other students. So the way we make that happen is first, education and training of our food service directors and the individuals who are working here to prepare the food. So we cover everything from cross-contact, the basics of food allergies in a gluten-free diet, how to administer an EpiPen in the event of an accidental exposure or reaction. So we really cover the basics. We cover the basics, and we go into, really understanding what an individual who has a food allergy, who follows a restricted diet, what they're needing to know and what they need to do when they come into the dining hall. The second component for us to be able to manage those students and to make them feel like they can fully participate in that program is communication. In the beginning of the school year, we do look to get a list from the school as far as what students have what allergies so that we can plan our menus accordingly. We'd like to make our menus as universally acceptable as we can, and if we can make slight modifications to our recipes, so now this dish works for everybody, we certainly are open to that. If that means, switching out to, an oil instead of something that might be milk-based, we're open to modifying our recipes for that. But that communication piece is really important for us. If we don't know what allergies the students are dealing with, if they don't make themselves known to us, it's very hard to make them feel like they can have that experience that some of their fellow students are having or be engaged in the program. And in some cases too, we certainly can hold something aside for them, so when they come into the dining hall, they can just ask for their plate. In some cases, we are ordering gluten-free bread, so that's available if they want to make a sandwich. We do things like house roast our deli meats, our turkey, our chicken, so that we know the ingredients that are in it, and we know that it does have some universal appeal, and it doesn't have any of the additional additives or things like that or ingredients that you just otherwise wouldn't think would be in something. So the communication piece and the training piece are really big aspects of managing that, like a student have that experience. And then also the ingredient feature now that's online has been very helpful in sort of facilitating that conversation between the parents and the students and ourselves as far as what is a safe meal for you when you come into the dining hall. And another area I know that was asked of me to talk about too is just our general approach to purchasing. Question?
Just had a question on the allergy.
Sure.
Our son has a nut allergy, and what I found is that most people don't really understand that it's lethal.
Sure.
And so I'm just curious, given that it's lethal and you kind of lumped it in with gluten and special diets, that what are the best practices today, and what are other schools doing? It just when you say education, education that would be everybody would be educated on that area. We had an incident recently here where another student threatened our son with peanut butter.
Sure.
And put it, so it's like a very, very dangerous situation, and curious as to, given your background and expertise, and also with independent schools where people aren't bringing food into the environment, how you're really able to control that, and just understanding, the lethal nature of that.
Sure. So I certainly will give somewhat of how Sage deals with peanuts and tree nuts in the dining hall, but also a little bit of, what are kind of best practices, outside of the dining hall when it comes to food allergy management. You're exactly right. Peanuts and tree nuts tend to be one of the most severe food allergies that children are facing. And it also is an allergy that they likely do not outgrow, so it's lifelong. Sage is our stance, because we recognize the severity of the peanuts and tree nuts, is that we do not prepare any dishes that contain peanuts and tree nuts. And they are not served from any of these lines, any of the hot lines or any of the salad bar lines. We do, and this is true, I would say, in more than 95% of the schools that we serve, that peanut butter is available in case a student would like to make a sandwich. But that is offset into a different area, so that it's not part of what is getting cooked and prepared behind the scenes with our staff. Now, the training that happens for our staff is we have, for our hourly employees, we have what's called a Take 5 program. And we go through short lessons with them about food allergies, just basic information, also how to recognize signs and symptoms of a reaction, how to, what foods likely contain allergens, those types of things. But our food service directors go through additional training. 4 times a year, we have events, and then our large institution, or our large event that Sage does, and every single time we have a presentation on food allergies. Everything from, as I said, how to administer EpiPens, how to craft a menu so that you are avoiding allergens, how to communicate and work with students, how to anticipate what their questions, what their concerns would be, understanding sort of manufacturing practices, those types of things. Now, we do, as far as education outside or understanding outside of the dining hall, it is recommended that there is, education with parents and teachers and any individual in a school setting, because there can be, simple arts and crafts projects could have allergens in them and can cause a reaction. Kids do keep food and things like that, or they bring stuff in their backpack. And you just don't know where some exposure might happen. And certainly people being educated on what the signs and symptoms of an allergic reaction are and what to do in those circumstances. Also, too, just it's generally good practice for people to feel comfortable and understand how to administer an EpiPen if you're ever faced with that situation. We give our managers demo EpiPens so that they can feel comfortable with that, and we also encourage them to use that with their staff to train them so they feel comfortable. Just knowing the procedures of how to handle a situation like that. And as you mentioned, one issue that seems to be surfacing within this arena is bullying or teasing with kids who have food allergies. So being aware of that and being sensitive to that and recognizing when it's happening, because it is life-threatening. And that has to be stressed. Somebody can die from a food allergy reaction.
Yes, somebody can die, and it was my son. And we're talking about 7 and 8 year olds, and kids do stupid things. And I just am very reluctant to, in a form, yes, it was bullying, but I also know that, again, kids do those things. But the issue for me as a parent with a child who it's not a do-over thing, and we're not talking about an upset stomach. I mean, if it would have touched his skin, at best, we would have had to administer a needle going into him, and he was terrified. We have drilled it into his head about because he's so highly allergic, and I live every day of that dread of getting that phone call, and every time I see Academy's number, and I just wonder, all these great choices. I volunteer in the lunchroom a lot, and there's great choices here. I just don't understand why, and I don't know if it's a SAGE thing or if it's an Academy thing, but why it's even a choice to be in the lunchroom, because sitting him at a nut-free table is not the answer, because there's not a teacher for every table. And so if that person's not making sure that student has cleared that peanut oil off their mouth and there, all it takes is one touch. And again, at best, we're having to administer an EpiPen, and something, not just for my son, any child that has that allergy, the trauma of that, and the fear, and it just seems like such an unnecessary thing to have when we have all these choices. I get in a public school when you do have people bringing in their lunches, that it's very hard. That's one reason why we chose Academy. For some reason, I had been told this is nut-free. Other schools, the school we came from was nut-free. So I know it's possible, and especially when they're provided good lunches and so many choices. I just don't understand why it's a choice, because you have to limit the risk. And yes, my child goes to parties or whatever, but we then choose which parents we feel get how serious this is. This, we don't get a choice. We have to send our child to school. And so I just really struggle with it's just one meal. And I love peanut butter. Good Lord, I do.
Right.
So I get that piece of it, but not when it's life or death.
And I think, what I can say, at least from our perspective, as Sager's perspective, as far as the peanut butter component and making that available within the dining hall, is that, at least in our experience, we have found a way to safely manage that within the dining hall and to keep that separate and to play a part in educating individuals about that.
But we had an incident, so we didn't. You know what I mean? Like in here.
Here.
Yes, and she was able to touch. Now it's like goodness, it's winter or fall, so he had a coat on. So she touched him 3 times. And again, I don't know if this is a SAGE issue or an Academy issue, but if it's going to be in here, the answer is not sitting the kids that are allergic together, because when they line up, they can be touched. If someone, at best, if they're going to eat peanut butter, they should be in a controlled place where a teacher can make sure that they are, no traces of it are on them before because it just doesn't matter where they're eating right then. It's making sure that there's no remnants of that.
Well, and I would say, anytime that there is, if a reaction does happen in the dining hall, certainly one of the things we like to do is a review of the situation and sort of how it came to be, because we certainly would want to figure out how to avoid something like that happening, in the future. And I do think that there are, when peanut butter is available, that there are things that you do have to consider as far as how you set up your dining hall, so that it is a safe place for the students.
So it sounds to me like there are a lot of controls with sage in the back for peanut and nut allergies and other allergies, but that there is a problem when it comes to the tables and the kids, and I really think that's something that we need to address as a community, because once it's put out, it seems like it's safe by sage, but as a community, we need to educate and figure out how to manage the allergies when it gets to the table, because something's breaking down. Right?
I would agree with that, and I think that the students also too being educated. I mean, kids can be educated about food allergies, and they should be educated about food allergies. So I don't think it's ever too young. My daughter is in preschool, and one of the students in her class is allergic, and I talked to her about, about an allergy. So I think that can be part of the learning process for the students as well.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, we don't have any allergies at all, any food allergies in my house, but a lot of both my kids, really good friends do. So we talk about it all the time before they come over. We have to wash our hands and do whatever. But I think, at least for my kids who are kindergarten and second grade, and in your son's class, my kids will listen to the teacher more than they'll listen to me from home. So maybe if there was an education component, every so often in the lower school classrooms, where the teachers could explain exactly what you're talking about, and how careful you have to be, and wash your hands, and the whole thing that I explain to my kids at home, that would go a long way. I mean, I understand what you're saying, and there are kids who probably cannot make it through a week without peanut butter, because there are things on the regular menu that they will not eat.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something you have to do. I mean, it scares me to death, and it's not my kid. It's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
In this day and age, there are so many kids with peanut allergies, and it is not okay that they could have a problem at school. I mean, you can't have these parents sending their kids here that fear for their kids' life every day. That's just not okay.
Of course, and I think that there's, I think a lot of times in these situations, the right approach is to really assess what's going on, to talk about what hasn't worked, and to really create strategies from there. I think that there, of course, one of the benefits of SAGE is that there is flexibility, there is mobility and choice, but again, it's best to know what does work, what isn't working, and figure out how to go from there.
Isn't there a nut-free something else we could put in addition, taking that out? Isn't there something else? I mean, I know there's tons of options that are in different grocery stores and things that are an alternative to actual peanut butter. It's like, something soy or something like that. I mean, can't we just eliminate it? Because it is, once it's here, it's open to anybody, and once they get it, they're then going to the tables where the kids are allergic, and then, as I say, all it takes is a touch for him, and he's...
And I'm just going to give the history as well as what we've done in the classrooms. I would argue that every child knows who the child is, or children are, that have peanut allergies because of the education that is provided in the classroom. So I think that part is being done, and being done very well. We did have a sun butter, and it was a disaster as a choice. Children didn't eat. The children that usually would eat peanut butter sandwiches or they hated it, and so it was pulled off. Are there other products? Possibly, I don't know. But it was tried once, and it was a disaster.
When you say disaster, I mean the kid just didn't like.
They did not like it.
Didn't like it.
They didn't like it. They would need it. So then they.
Couldn't you try something else? I mean, in terms of disaster, a disaster would be a kid dying in your school.
Right. And
you're just waiting for it's like a loaded gun. It is a loaded gun in your school.
One way or the other.
I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. You use the term disaster. I mean, to me, that's not a disaster. For a child.
Which is why the decision was made to take it out of the menu, because children were not eating it, and so therefore children were making other choices. So that's kind of history. So I'm just sharing that piece with you. I'm not arguing one way or the other for or against it. I'm just saying that's what we did try, and because somebody asked we can use an alternative. That was several years ago. I don't know if there are other choices that could be made now. So I'm open, and I'm sure, I have a feeling that everybody is open to the possibility, recognizing the challenge of not only your son, but also many children in managing this.
Yeah, that clearly it's an issue that we need to work more at, all right? And we will, all right? We'll meet after the second here. We did try the sun butter. It just they didn't like it. But I'm sure there are other options that we need to look at, and we'll look at those, all right? We don't want to take things away from, the other 1,200 people that are here. We recognize it's very important, no question. It's the most important thing that we keep the kids safe, right? We'll resolve it, all right?
I was going to say, another component of it with the education would be is I hear all these wonderful options, and I can say my first grader probably has never participated in any of those options, and I think it's because he doesn't know. I think that, especially the younger kids, because maybe an alternative, because obviously people go to the peanut butter because they don't know what else to eat, and I know my daughter does it too, every day, because she doesn't know what else to eat. And I think that we can only be here so much teaching them all these wonderful options that we hear about, but maybe we need to do more education of really going through, taking an extra hour for lunch one day and saying, here are all what you could do. Because I've never heard them talk about the spotlight or knowing what green, yellow, red is. I think that it's a wonderful program, but I don't think our lower school kids are benefiting from it. Some of them are, but I don't think they all know. So maybe we see more education to get away from peanut butter as an easy option, or cheese sandwiches, or something. Some other option sandwiches besides just.
You're making a really great point, and I'll tell you the way that I resolved that with I have 3 children here. And when this started, my oldest was in 2nd grade, and now I have 9th, 7th, and 5th. And so my kids are clearly sort of out of the mix of lower school where they're trying to figure out what they're going to eat. But what I did with them every morning or the night before, we'd go online, look at what the menu was, and say, here's what's offered. What are you interested in tomorrow? Because my biggest concern at that point was time. And I wanted to make sure that they were coming in and squeezing every minute of lunch that they could, because I didn't feel like there was enough time for them anyway. So they had a plan. They had a game plan when they walked in the door here. And Caroline knew she was gonna have soup that day, or Clay knew that he was gonna get whatever General Tso's chicken or whatever was on the main bar. And that really seemed to help them. So I agree, education is excellent, but if we're able to sort of front load it at home, it's, at least for my kids, it was a great thing for them, and they quit complaining, and they quit eating at that point only white pasta with.
That's the other thing. Noodles every day. Noodles and
it's
and I don't know. I know the menu's the same. If you look at it, I figured out on a monthly basis, each week it's the same, and we have a pattern. You can figure it out, but it is hard. I know they're just overwhelmed. Sometimes they forget because there are all these other choices.
I think that's a great comment that you made, because I find that the time is one of the biggest issues. We have these little girls and little guys, and it takes them a couple minutes to even figure out, or not even more than a couple minutes to figure out what they want and what they want to choose. That's why I think, and my little guy, I think it depends on the child. I have a kindergartner who eats everything, and she makes her choices and can eat, and it's on a table for her and everything. But when they get into here, and my little guy takes so much time to eat, he's a slower eater. He can't so peanut butter and jelly is what he goes to. I'd be fine if he didn't eat that. I would love him to have more choice, or not that he has more choice, but to choose the turkey. We talk about it all the time. He's always like, but I don't have time. And I think it overwhelms him and gets him kind of anxious, because they just hurry them. So, and I know there's so much in the day, and we have all the specials and all the things that they need to get to. But I just wonder if that's something we should look at all, is the time that they have to eat. Because we don't have a snack that they've done away with the snack, which I think is an issue as well. We want these kids to focus all day in school, and we hurry them through lunch, which is probably one of the most important times of their day, so that they can have the brain power to keep going It is my fear every day. My child is not, and like I said, my kindergartner I don't worry about, but I have a child that is very picky and he doesn't eat well, and so I have to half the time I'm force feeding him at home. Well, there's nobody that's going to do that, That's a whole other issue. We shouldn't be doing it, but I just think that if he was given a little bit more time at lunch, and I feel like when I talk to parents, everybody has the same concern.
Yeah.
If we're not going to have a snack that I can count on during the day, then he has to get protein in there, or he is. So that just, I just feel like if he had more time to think about, okay, what can I get at the bar? Maybe I will do turkey today, but it's just so rushed for everybody.
Actually, Catherine Kay. When the new, and might not help everybody in this room at our age, but the new facility was there a plan? Are there plans for another cafeteria or something, or?
No,
Doug.
I can talk a little bit about that. There are no plans for a new cafeteria or a dining hall, but there are plans as part of the full project of the building of the middle school, the loop road, the auxiliary gym, lockers, those sorts of things. It all depends on how much. Yeah, it all depends on how much money comes. The middle school is and the loop road is the first tier, and then in order for us to move, the plan is to move to the Barton room to have the lower school have their lunch in the Barton room, but that cannot happen unless the auxiliary gym and lockers are built, because that's where the PE and the wrestling move to. All right, so that's probably close to another $2 million add before you can move into the Barton lunch. No, that's what the issue is. It all costs money. And that's
mom, I heard.
Excellent.
I've heard that about the time from a number of parents and how fast it is. Is there something going on there that beyond in terms of the number of kids that you're trying to get through and the size of the dining hall?
I know that the amount of time that it takes has been talked about for a number of years with the division.
Okay, so I'm a Harry Potter fan, and if I could magic some more time, I would, because everybody, every adult on this campus, as well as a lot of kids, and I know all the parents, the time is the challenge that just works against us. We start lunches at 11, or 5 till 11, and go till 1 o'clock. And we're feeding over, almost 2,000 people. There is just, we are in and out so quickly. I wish we had. That is something that we've been looking at forever. 20 years, 23 years I've been here. We've been looking at it. And lunch, the dining room's just gotten more and more compact, to the point that, we have kids in one part of in the Westwater room instead of all in here. So it's just, I don't have a great...
If you had a bigger facility where you could get more people through at the...
Right, if we didn't all have
then
to be here,
right.
then we could definitely do it.
Because you could have two at the same time.
So it's a function of the facility that's not enabling you to get the number of people through that you need to. Gotcha.
We have over time, and Mike's staff have, we positioned and configured how the line is to get it maximum number of people that we can. We can position these specifically so that you can move to these rather than going. That I think goes back to Catherine's comment about planning, for the kids to understand, and maybe the faculty to help in that as well as the parents to help understand what you're going to do in that lunch.
I know in some classes they'll read the menu in class before in the lower school, so they kind of have an idea. Yes, we probably could have an additional component where we just reiterate it a couple times through the year. That would be helpful. I love the idea what Catherine had talked about using, talking to your kids about it. So it's going to take all of us to help them get to be more and more comfortable with coming in and making really good choices. But the time piece, it's just, it's pretty efficient once they're in here. But it's...
And the administration has done a lot to work within the constraints that we have. Kate has done a great job this year of making sure that the kids, if they start lunch at 10:55, they're not leaving their classroom at 10:55. They're here at 10:55, and that's a huge improvement. And a couple of years ago, we
sort of flip-flopped when the grades were going to recess, because what we found was that the younger kids were coming in and they were just frenzied, because what they really needed to do was sort of get rid of all that extra energy. So now they have recess first, and then they come in here and they're more focused than they were. I'm not going to say they're focused, but more focused on eating, and they're hungry. So I feel like the school's trying to be very creative, but I'm confident Kate would welcome suggestions too, because they're just, we only have what we have. We only have the space we have. We have so many kids, and it is not perfect. I don't think anybody in here will tell you that it is, but I feel like we're making it as good as we possibly can.
Hands. I just want, before I go to full comments, I did want to say that education, what we've noticed, at least being at K through 12 schools, is the lower school kids have hardest time getting through the line. And that they're the students that seem to really need the preempting before they come into the dining hall. And I would say that's a combination of looking at the menu ahead of time and really identifying with them what they are going to have before they step into the dining hall. The other thing is them feeling comfortable that they know which station to go to get that. So that's one of the reasons why we also have these things labeled above, and the lower kid schools may not really think to look up there or really know to read there, so even possibly having them come in and get a little tutorial of sort of where you would find what could be beneficial for them, so they know what destination they're going to when they come into the dining hall. Because from a food service standpoint, management, we know that when you have a scattered system, which is what this looks like, that people can get their food and sit down and have more time to eat versus everything sort of being clumped together. So part of facilitating that time for the kids is them knowing what station to go to get what they would like. Yes.
I'd add to that demographic of people to be educated, the parents, because when we come in for lunch bunch, I think it's important for us to know how to not just know what's at each station, but what's an EpiPen, how to use an EpiPen, even though the nurses or the teachers might use it, but you never know when the parent might be the backup or the parent might need to function in an emergency situation. So I think for the parents to be educated, either in a forum like this or multiple forums, so that we can have the opportunity to know what's available, what to do in an emergency situation, and whatever the policies are or will change to be, so that we are up to speed, up to stuff in terms of what's going on. And then we become the ambassadors to help others as well. So we're part of the important part of the puzzle.
Sure. Yes, and before I go there, real quickly, is there any other questions relating to this issue, real quick?
Just to add to what you've been talking about, what kind of components of nutrition education are integrated within the curriculum, whether it's in the lower school, middle school? Because I think these are all things that, yes, we have to educate the lower school students about, proper nutrition choices, but it seems to me that all this needs to be kind of carried through, whether it's, going out and, growing your corn or your squash and having some type of garden. I'm not trying to make this into fluff, because I think this is all really, really important as far as integrating food allergies, proper nutrition selections, and having the signs and everything here, on the wall and at the individual stations is good, but it has to start somewhere else, and maybe we need more parent education so that we can take these choices, having these discussions about what are proper food choices at home, carrying it through to what's going on in the classroom, and then taking that into the cafeteria. This is a societal problem. It's not just Columbus Academy as far as food choices, but being able to integrate what's going on at school and at home, and then what goes on at the cafeteria would be something that I think we could all work together to try to improve children's choices and the parents' concerns about what the choices are. And no parent should have to worry about, every single day whether their child's having exposure to peanuts or whatever kind of, life-threatening allergies they have.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to answer his first or not, but my question is like the time and they have to eat their lunch. I have a daughter that starts at before 11 and then doesn't come home till 3:45, and by the time she gets home she's so hungry and starving that she ends up either having a headache, she gets migraines, she either has a headache daily or a stomach ache because she just is so hungry. And I have a kindergartner who's 5 who eats right after her, so it's like 11 to 11:15. And he's 5 and gets off the bus at 3:45, and same thing. They're both miserable because they're starving. They're just so hungry. And my question is, can we implement an afternoon snack? And if you want to talk about organics first and come back to that, but I'm really hoping that we can at least have some type of I understand not doing a morning snack because then maybe kids wouldn't eat their lunch, but I'm talking about maybe the afternoon snack, giving them something to keep them going in the afternoon so that when they come home, I mean, first of all, for learning purposes, but then when they come home, my kids literally can't talk to me. They're so hungry. They're either crying, they have a headache, or their stomach ache, which I know a lot of kids go to the nurse too for food. Which could be something that you could talk to the nurse and find out, because I know I've heard from many parents, my kids go to the nurse every day to get a snack because they're hungry. So I just would love to see some type of an afternoon snack implemented, and a good snack, like something healthy, and it doesn't have to be like goldfish or anything like that, but I know at CSG they do it. They have a morning and afternoon snack, so I know that Sage is used to having some type of a snack or providing a snack to children in the classroom.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm maybe speaking somewhat on behalf of the school, but I know that there's a lot, and I'm going to move to sort of the organic and purchasing side of things, just to facilitate somewhat of the discussion. We can go back to some other questions regarding this, but I know that there's a lot of energy and detail that goes into planning the schedule for the students, and I'm sure there's a lot you guys are trying to pack into a school day. So I think really the question of timing of things and whether there can be a snack, and that's somewhat that is probably best sort of discussed amongst administration and things like that. But logistically, can snacks be done? Sure, but I'm sure that's just a broader conversation with the school.
So, got a big target on me. I go from the historical, because when I was in lower school and we did have snack, the challenge was storage and the quality of the snack, and without proper storage you have unwanted pests. A lot of unwanted pests. So if we don't have the, so that's kind of how the quality of the snacks that we were getting, because sometimes initially it was parents that were bringing them in, which was a significant cost if you're doing it for each classroom. But then we started doing it. So I don't have a solution. I'm not opposed to snacks, but I think it would really be, and I don't know how other schools are doing it. If Sage provides it, what the cost is for there, what the storage is, and how it's delivered. So those are lots of questions that are really good questions. I don't have any answers at this point. I think it's worth the conversation, and Doug and I and a few others will be talking about it.
Yes, and I can say Sage does help schools deliver snacks, and make snacks available to students. So I think that certainly is a conversation that we can have with the school as far as the management of it.
Just really quick, I wanted to go back to when several different parents were mentioning, like the kids in the lower school, like first and second grade, when they move into this, not having a lunch for them and all the choices. Is there maybe something, and there might already be, and I just don't remember, during the first couple weeks of school when the lower grades are brought through? Because I think, I know my second grader had that community day where they went all around the school, and do they actually show them all the different stations and all the different choices? Because I think that would go a long way for them to actually just see it.
I think
I don't know.
I'm really confident, and I'm speaking without having asked the teachers, but I'm going to assume, because it's just basic good practices at the very beginning of the year, every child is exposed, because there's new students. And so they would bring their classes before the first lunch and just kind of show everybody what, as well as at the end of the year, the rising first graders spend a number of weeks in the dining room to kind of get acclimated. Then there's the whole summer, and so,
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Tana, I help out a lot for lower school lunch bunch, and so when the kids are brought their 2 main items, it's just an example, popcorn shrimp, tortellini, General Tso's chicken, chicken wings, chicken tenders. Can you look at these two options and maybe see if there's some way to get those better? Because that's what's brought to pre-K, K, first and second, and a lot of those kids just eat that. And it's not that impressive to look at. And then, like, I love these berries that are on this table today, and I wish those berries could be served to the kids. Because I've never seen strawberries or raspberries or blueberries.
So basically, if I'm understanding, it's kind of the menu mix that's brought to the table for the lower school
these two choices.
students.
You know, we talked about looking at it. I pull it up at night and look at it to talk to my daughter about it. And it's like, those two choices, I think, could just be improved.
Sure, and I can talk to Michael about that. And I know my understanding too, as far as the grades, the limited grades that are getting sort of a family style approach, and I think that is only happening for 2 grades. They're certainly only bringing over sort of a limited selection of what's available, so we can talk about, you know, how to mix that up.
Yeah, I had a question about that as well, because there's always white pasta and yogurt every single day.
Brought to the tables.
Yes.
Okay.
With maybe one other option and maybe 2 vegetables, and they're definitely, and chocolate milk, which I don't understand why that's even an option for that age group, but.
So that's kindergarten.
That's for kindergarten.
That doesn't happen past kindergarten.
Well, I'm just saying for kindergarten, I don't even think it should be an option for kindergarten.
Yeah, and I think as far as the logistics of what's brought to the table can certainly be, you know, discussed, and we can sort of see, you know, what we can do, because my understanding too is that there is still, the child is still free to go choose, you know, if there isn't something at the table that they would like. So I can certainly talk and work with Michael and Ron about that. As far as just moving on to the purchasing aspect of things and sort of the Sage's approach to how we establish relationships with the people we buy food from, and the question to organic, our approach really is first and foremost finding local products. And then sort of things, what we purchase is somewhat secondary to that. We like to support the local economy. We like to get local ingredients as we find that they're the freshest choice available. And since we are a made from scratch company, they tend to provide the best flavor and the best seasonal ingredients as well. So that's our first priority, in addition to safety. When we talk about in a kitchen of feeding over 1,000 students, you know, food safety is extremely important to us. So we have standards that anybody we buy food from has to follow. And also too, we're looking to see, Ron, I'm sure from time to time, has visited even our vendors' locations to see what it looks like, what are their practices, does it seem like they're following, you know, the food safety guidelines that we expect of them and that we know is expected of them from, you know, the government who's ever regulating them. We also have a purchasing department in our home office in Maryland, and we have specific criteria and standards. Just to give you an example, we don't source anything that contains trans fats. We don't source anything that contains MSG. So we sort of have this list of standards that we follow that initially start the conversation with somebody we'd be purchasing from. Now, when it specifically comes to organic, we love to buy organic when it makes sense and when it's available. Most of the time, some of the products that we know we can find organic and that are regularly available tend to be salad greens and some of your produce or your vegetables, but those also tend to be the things that we can buy locally. And what we've learned from our local vendors is that from a business standpoint, your local vendors tend to be smaller, so they're not these large-scale providers who they struggle with the financial component of applying for organic labeling. So they may follow organic practices, but as a business for a local farmer, it's not beneficial for them to apply for that labeling because it's too expensive for them. So they choose to really get their message out about their practices by working with people like us, or, you know, if they're at their local farmers market, letting people know what their practices are.
Is there a list available of the local vendors that you use, and is that available for us to see? And about what percent of your vendors are local? And
so I would say we can definitely provide a list that who we purchase from that's local throughout the year. Now, from time to time that changes. So for example, one local vendor, if we establish a relationship with, let's say, a local bakery, we likely can get products from them throughout the year. But if we establish a relationship with a local farmer who does produce or fruit, we're only going to be able to get some stuff from them from a seasonal standpoint. So that can certainly be provided as far as who we source from. The other thing we do in the dining hall, which is probably somewhat of a disadvantage for you guys because you're not here in the dining hall every day, but we try to make that known to the students. What is coming from a local vendor, what is organic that day, so that they are aware, and particularly most of the older students tend to gravitate towards that information or are more educated or interested in that realm, but we can provide that.
I was just curious when you say local, local can mean a lot of different things. What is your
We define local as within 150 miles of Columbus Academy.
And from the sources, as part of your practice, when you talk about the standards in which you look at potential vendors, are you looking, or is one of your standards that you want them to have sustainable farming practices for those that are providing produce? And also the other question would be when it comes to dairy and proteins, is part of your standard looking for sources that don't do hormones and are you administer antibiotics to their livestock if it's in the case of milk or other proteins that you might have available as part of the entree?
Sure, so we definitely look at those things, and I can say it's been a process-based approach for us as far as finding those vendors and finding ones that certainly fit within budgets and also to fit within availability, that they can regularly throughout the year have enough supply to actually source, to source a school this large, but not also source other schools within the area. So that's one of the concerns sometimes with the organic and the local is the availability and the actual inventory to be able to provide. So there's a limitation in the market because of that. But we have made strides over the year, and why I say process-based approaches, because we moved to, antibiotic-free, hormone-free milk. We're looking for those meat vendors who, are going to provide those options. Now, it's also good to have a little bit of understanding of the industry because certain animals you can't administer antibiotics or hormones to. So sometimes we think that just because we hear antibiotic and hormones that, by law you're allowed to give that to every animal and you're not. So pigs and chickens are treated differently than cattle is. So certainly some things are, other than their natural hormones that are occurring in their body, can't be administered hormones otherwise. So we are constantly looking for moving in that process-based approach and looking towards availability and safety. So as we are able to find a vendor that can regularly supply that information, we go towards that. But I would say Ohio is probably a great example of where there may be more actual choice as far as local meat, as opposed to some of the other states that we're in that don't have that choice. Yes?
The second half of her question, which was what percentage of your meals are actually local and organic?
And that we would just have to go back and look at our purchasing list.
Do you have a general idea? I mean, there's an average, right?
Well, I mean, I would say I don't know that off the top of my head right now, and it probably varies from school to school. So that's again why I would just say we would really go back and just look and see what our purchasing history has been to give you that number.
Do you have a goal?
As a company, our goal is to always make as much available as we can, but there's so many factors that go into it regionally. That's why it's difficult for us to, say specifically what is here versus what's, at another school. So.
I have, as you know, we do the food service over at, maybe you don't know, we do the food service over at Columbus School for Girls as well. And what I've tried to do is I look for local vendors, and she says even closer than 150 miles. I've been looking to work with vendors in a 100-mile radius of Columbus. I think it's a growing number. And shame on me for not knowing the exact percentage. But since we've taken over this food service at this operation and at Columbus School for Girls, it has getting larger and it will continue to grow. We work with vendors, but but like Hannah mentioned, they have to have, and there's safety issues. They have to have, how much insurance? They have to carry a large amount of insurance just to be on the safe side. We can't just go to local markets and pick up food because a lot of times these farmers don't have the insurance, or they don't even know where the food is coming from themselves. There's been times where we visited markets, and I go in and I want to know exactly where vegetables they come from, and they can't even give me the listing. So it's a continual battle working with these vendors to get this information. And Mike and I are working on that all the time. So Mike and I will work on that and try to get something on the website, a percentage. But on our part, that's going to continue to grow. One factor is it fluctuates between the seasons when local produce is available. So when we can get local produce, we do. But there's sometimes when the winter months that we can't, so we'll see that percentage go down. That's about the best. Anybody else?
Can you talk about, I know you talked about CSG, they know they work with Local Matters. Can you talk about that how you work with Local Matters and what they provide in terms of nutrition education for the children as well as?
I'm not familiar with that.
Michael and Karen Jones.
It's an organization that represents and tries to foster, working with locally sourced. And I know somebody mentioned to me just last week that they do some educational work, and for me, that's something that I think would be great for us if we could have our kids learning a little bit more about why it's important that they eat foods that are locally sourced and that are organic and all of that, and not just sort of here it is and this is what you should choose, but really have some type of education around it.
Okay, I will look into that. I'll talk to Vanessa. She's our director over there. She actually came from this account. She was assistant here and she was promoted over there. So I will talk to her more about that and get that information.
We have the contact information if you'd like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was just on that point, I was just gonna say sometimes, there may be curriculum in the classrooms or there may be other programs, while it's food related, we might not know about it, or we might not be sort of part of it. So again, that would be something for us to look into. Yes?
I was just wondering, somebody might have already asked this, but are our breads and pastas, are they all like whole grain?
I do not believe that. I believe that you have there's choices available. So there is a whole grain pasta available every day, there's whole wheat bread available every day, but there's also white bread that is available, and there's also white pasta that is available.
Can we maybe try to get rid of the white pasta and the white bread?
White bread, right.
I mean, I think this is what I'll say. In the schools that I'm running through the list of schools that we have, and I am not aware of any one of our schools that is exclusively whole grain or whole wheat based. Now, I do know schools that are using sort of a process-based approach to that, of trying to move to that. And to lessen the number of those. And one school I know was able to source sort of the white whole wheat bread, and thus have been able to get away from the white sliced bread. And I also know that we've had schools that, again, it's been processed for them, process-based approach. So to give an example, their grilled cheese now are always made on whole wheat bread, but the way they started was that only one slice was whole wheat bread, and so when they put it out, and I mean, these are tactics that have worked and have proven successful to us, but so when they would put out the grilled cheese, they always put the white bread face up. So the little kids or the students didn't know that the second slice was whole wheat bread, but then as they got used to it and there was nobody was making any comments, it didn't seem to be causing any issues, then they added the second slice and just served it as such. And then the kids were then educated that they actually were eating it, but sometimes those little tricks, here and there, they do work, if that's really where you want to be.
I think for the pre-Kers, we don't have a choice, which is where I'm with you. And it's probably better if we just had the option of being able to say I prefer whole grain. Because the option is there, just not quite pre-K. We just have the same list to go off of. So that's a separate issue. It's just for us to do.
And I think Mike can probably answer some of the specific questions.
Well, the buns are all whole grain. the buns that we serve are all whole grain. Like when we do hot dogs or hamburgers, they don't have the option. They do have the option white bread or whole wheat over here. We have some wraps, we have some whole wheat buns down below. So in the pasta we have, but not for pre-K. We can make it an option for them. We have whole wheat pasta every single day. We have brown rice every day. We have the beans every day over here. On our salad bar is the list of the farms and the availability from our vendor, Raw Produce. So we don't have to go out and find the vendor, they find it for us, and we have that posted over on the salad bar. We have one on this side too, as far as the range. Yeah.
I want to go back to what I was saying before about education of the parents, and then also what's been mentioned, education from the students. Because even this conversation, there might be people in the room that don't know the background with regard to like white sugar versus brown sugar versus, you know, just the various options. Or Deborah was just saying, you know, high fructose corn syrup versus regular syrup. So if the parents are not either aware or up on that, then how are the children going to know to make choices? My child's in the lower school, and I come to lunch bunch, and they're supposed to have, you know, each one of the different categories there, but you have to stay on them to make sure they eat that. And then they're constantly wanting to run to the bars to get other food, and then haven't even finished everything necessarily on their plate. So my points are threefold. One, education of the parents about nutrition. And so maybe that's something, Deborah's the education chair for PACA. Education of the children about nutrition. And then just generally having the conversation with the school, the parents, administrators to make that something that everybody's aware of. Because even though those options are there, the kids aren't going to know, you know, I should get whole wheat versus white. Or maybe I'm allergic to wheat and I don't even know it. You know, those kind of things. So, education.
Okay, we can probably have one more question and then we're going to wrap up this great conversation. Because we have to serve lunch. Are we getting ready for lunch?
You are welcome to stay for lunch.
Additional questions there are, we would love it if you could fill these out and give us additional feedback, because maybe we just need to have some additional forums. Obviously, I think we've got lots of really good questions and ideas raised. So one more question.
Just to kind of dovetail on that, but I think it goes back to your criteria in choosing the foods. So when I just pulled up ingredients, it gives very basic ingredients, but it doesn't give the full listing of ingredients. So is there a way for us as parents to know what your criteria is? Back to high fructose corn syrup, you know, how much of that is in your criteria, or?
Well, I will say the online ingredient feature where you can click on the menu item and look at the listing of ingredients of the dish. One of the limitations is that, you know, if it has, let's just say something like soy sauce in it, we don't have that specific label that's here at Columbus Academy that's going to tell, from my standpoint in Baltimore. It's not really possible for me to get that label from Michael and get it on the computer. So there are some things that, if you want to know additional ingredients of some of those types of things, we do need to come to the kitchen to get that. But most of the time, you know, a lot of our recipes, generally speaking, you know, tend to be not a laundry list of ingredients, even when we're making from scratch, because we're feeding kids. And so we're trying not to make things too complicated or keeping them familiar. So if there is something that's on there that seems like a kind of ready prepared type of food, for example, like a soy sauce, because Sage does not make house-made soy sauce, then we need to go to the kitchen to get that. But there's a lot of cases too where, to just give a contrast, a lot of our managers make their own made barbecue sauce. So when they do that, and if you were to go in and click on a menu item that had a house-made barbecue sauce on it, then it gives you that secondary click to that ingredient. So you can click on the barbecue sauce and it'll give you the listing of all the ingredients that in the barbecue sauce if it's house-made. So coming from here. So there is one limitation, I would say, of that program, with some of those sort of ready-to-use, or that tends to be the sauces and things like that, or the bread. You know, you really need to come here or ask Michael to kind of read the ingredients off of the bread, like the sliced bread that we're getting from the vendor. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have, clearly we can go on and on about this conversation, and we will in a lot of different forums. So I appreciate everybody's questions, comments, concerns, and ideas about ways that we can make it even better than it is, and just continue to keep the dialogue going. I would also like to just throw in a plug for the film on Wednesday, November 13th, Consuming Kids, the Commercialization of Chocolate. So there's flyers for this, and which there's also streaming of the film available prior to the 13th.